the Hopevale podcast. I'm Tamara Schlatter, the Bay City Campus Director. I'm joined by Pastor Josh Pardee this morning as we wrap up our current sermon series, Crooked Sticks. This week, we're focusing on family mission, how God uses imperfect families to carry out his perfect purposes. Welcome.
Thank you.
So glad to have you here as we wrap up this series and dive into Genesis. We're looking at chapters 48 through 50, which brings us to the final chapters of Jacob's story. And as he nears the end of his life, Jacob turns his focus towards blessing his children and his grandchildren, not just with words of affection, but with intentional prophetic guidance. So what does this teach us about spiritual inheritance, the values, faith, and vision we pass down to the next generation?
Yeah, I think it teaches us a lot as far as the importance of blessing and even the words that you speak over people in your life. Like, we hold on to those and we remember those. We're shaped and formed by those. So I think there's real potential to see. I think we do see in Jacob's family how he lives into blessing his grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh, through Joseph. And then he blesses all of his sons, and then they all become the tribes of Israel. What I like about the progression of or that I find interesting, I guess, about the progression of the story there is Joseph first gets blessed by his father, and then he does have this moment in Genesis 50 where the brothers, are not sure that he's actually changed, or they're fearful that their lives might be at risk because dad has died, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And so they try and leverage dad's name to get, to make sure that they're going to be taken care of, or whatever it may be. And I do wonder if in that moment Joseph isn't just kind of considering how, just prior to that he had been brought in and blessed, and like this, it becomes this legacy of, okay, so this is who we are as a family, and this is, we go out and we bless each other, even in those moments where it may be difficult, or
So you're saying having been blessed is what allowed him to progress in that moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's part of the power of Genesis 50 is it's not only Joseph's action, but it's Jacob's legacy almost coming to fruition through Joseph in some senses. So yeah, I think too, like, if we all were to look at our own families, we have those things that we hold on to, right? Like there would be things that are true that you guys would say as the Schlatter family of like, this is how we do this, and this is who we are, and this is what we're known for. And, we have that in the Pardee family of like, we do these things, we don't do those things, those types of things. And really those are powerful practices, and sometimes even like rituals, not in a, kind of like, I don't know, sometimes people use that word in like almost like a spooky way or something, but like in a practice sort of, we rehearse this part of the story over and over again. And so, yeah, I think that's part of what you see in those last few chapters of Genesis that's so compelling, is this family that God is building for the world is one that's going to is blessed and then goes out and blesses everyone else. And this is like the posture in which they are sent out into the world.
Yeah, I love that. I heard it said that the people live up to or down to the expectations that you put on them. And so like kind of actually reminded me of your message this summer. Was it Father's Day when you talked about words matter? And so like this intentional blessing over the family is giving them something to live up to. And so we see that as Joseph then lives up to that and turns around and blesses his brothers. And so what part of forgiveness like plays a role in that as well, though?
Yeah, I think that's, the living up to is the challenging part too, because you don't always want to. And I think forgiveness is at the center of the action for Joseph in the story, right? So we even talked a little bit in the sermon of, I do think there's these moments where we want to hold on to how all the ways that we've been wronged, right? And we want to rehearse that story over and over again. And I think that is like the most basic human like default position that we're in of like, well, the boss said this, so that must mean X, or my spouse said this, or, you know, they said this when I was 5 or whatever. And I'm not trying to minimize that because, again, those words linger and they matter. But I think the invitation is if you are a son or daughter of the King, you don't have to continue to live by those words. You don't have to rehearse them. And that's the power of Joseph's action, is that he's willing to release those ideas and those words and the pain and the hardship that he went through. And he's through the act of releasing, he's able to live a new and better story and then extend forgiveness. And I do think like there are so many times where we struggle with that. We struggle with it in our own families. You know, I think I would speak even as a pastor of saying I see this a lot of times with people in churches of you come up against relational turmoil with somebody, which is just kind of part of being human. That's always the case. It doesn't matter if it's at school or it's on the playground or it's in the workplace, like it always is. And then, you know, I think there's this impulse to just kind of like self-protect, pull away. I'll just even, I mean, and sometimes I'll go find a different church community. Now, please hear me. I'm not, you know, like there's moments where you need to have clear boundaries and you need to have maybe even people walking through different things. But I mean, I know of so many stories or examples where I understand it's really hard to do that work of not rehearsing and of releasing and moving into forgiving. But I actually think that that's the work of Jesus, and that's the work that we're invited into. And I think if you go even from that level, then back into our families, like that's how we can move forward as a family. That's how there's going to be moments that are difficult that we're going to have to navigate. And so you either can stay stuck in that, or you can, you can try and live into this idea of releasing and forgiveness. And then the flip side of that is not only if you're the one releasing and forgiving, but the one who is wronged, then also receiving grace, right? And reminding yourself that all of this happens because of grace. And then that leads to, I think that comes from Jacob, even as he's giving this blessing at the end, where he is reflecting on God being the shepherd of his life, he says. And he's reflecting on not only, you know, this wasn't any of our ability or because of anything we brought to the table, but God has been the one who's been faithfully drawing this straight line, even though we've kind of been screwing it up all the way through.
So are there small habits or rhythms that can help us cultivate like this blessing mindset within our homes, in our spiritual families, instead of falling into the blame and criticism?
I don't have a list, but what comes to my mind is one of the things we talk about even here as an organization on our staff team is we have this idea of believe the best, right? And so, you know, if I hear that, you know, you did something or someone did something, my first impulse is going to be, well, I'm sure that she was doing or he was doing exactly what they were supposed to, or there's something that I don't know, right? So I think like even within our own families, again, that gets back to like the narrative thing of like you know, some people will call it like lizard brain. We go into lizard brain mode immediately of just like, believe the worst. Everything's falling. Of course they did this. The world's against me. And so I think there's opportunity there even to begin to just believe the best. Restate the question, because there was one other thing I was going to say to that.
What are small habits or rhythms that help us cultivate a blessing mindset at home or within our spiritual family instead of falling into blame or criticism?
Yeah, I think the other part of that is what does it mean to be someone who is blessing other people? So it is believing the best, but then it's also creating space for people to be on a journey
Yeah.
and allowing them to not be where you are,
Yeah.
even on your own journey. I mean, one of the most amazing phenomenons of humanity is we will learn something new and we will have known it for like what feels like 5 seconds, and then we will turn around to the person who doesn't know and be like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you get this? Right. And like, I watch this with my kids. Like, it's like, how do you not know this math thing that I just learned? I'm like, you just learned it, and they're 2 years younger than you. Of course they don't.
For the older siblings. Yeah.
And but it's that thing over and over again. So I think just, again, allowing space and grace for people, whether that's on a maturity level of just, like normal maturity, I guess, but then even like spiritual maturity or emotional maturity or whatever it is. Like, I think there's some ways to, if you can figure out how to create that space for people and provide language and then safety for people to be on a journey, it actually does give you a pathway forward, a practice, again, maybe even a rehearsing of a different story that invites you into that. And then the final thing I would just say is maybe even consider, what does it look like to be a blessing? Like, what does it look like to bless my spouse? What does it look like to bless my coworkers? What does it look like to bless, the people that I'm serving donuts to at church, right, whatever it may be. I think so many times our lives, it just never stops. We're just constantly on the move. And so we don't take time to just kind of pause, and it's really actually not that hard or complicated to just take an extra second with someone each day and point out something that you really appreciate about them, or to encourage them, or to maybe it's just literally pray with them, or all those different things. And those are all available resources that I think we actually hunger and crave. One of the the privileges of my role is there's moments where people are navigating things in their life and they want prayer for it, right? And it's a holy act, and I'm not discounting it, but in some senses, this is like all of us could pray with someone, and so maybe it's just as simple as if you hear a coworker or a friend or someone who's sharing something that's difficult, it's like, hey, could we just pause and pray? I can't solve that for you, but I want to come before the Lord with you in that request, because I think that matters.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it's those moments where it's like you feel like, oh, I'm seen and I'm cared about, and God's at work in this. So, yeah, I think again, we could probably come up with a million different things, but those are kind of the things that come to my mind of how to go about doing that.
Yeah, and if we're going to be a blessing to others, I think that reflective time, we celebrated communion yesterday, and it's a time to reflect on the blessings that God has poured out for us. And so the more that we reflect on his blessings towards us, the more we're able to do that for other people. And Jacob does that at the end of his life as well. He sits back and he processes all that God has done for him. We see that happening in this moment. So how important is it for us to do that, to take time and reflect on all that he's done for us?
Yeah, I think, and that's where the ability to bless comes from, right? Is like what you're pointing us to, and this invitation, even as we practice communion, and this invitation of like, we are blessed, and Jesus blesses the elements, and even as he, at the end of Luke, as he raises to the skies, he's extending his hands of blessing over the disciples. Like these are literally the last words he's giving to the people on earth, is blessing over them. And so I think that's powerful, because when you're invited into it, now it shapes our family identity. It shapes how we see ourselves and how we enter into our world.
Yeah. So how do we discern the mission or purpose God has for our own families or our communities, as Jacob did that for his family?
How do we discern that? I don't know. I think the over
Stump pastor.
Yeah, my mind runs in a lot of directions.
I know.
I would say the overarching mission that we all have is that we want to be a community of grace and truth, inviting people to know and follow Jesus. And And that comes from Jesus being our example of grace and truth. And so I find it to be the most compelling vision that there is of figuring out what that means. And then I think that takes on little local flavors within our community groups and Bible studies and all of those different things. And so, yeah, I think there's invitation to, I like the idea of, as we reflect on the story of Jacob and his family, and we end with them being a family that is on mission, that they're the ones who are sent to bless. I was, just even as I was, preparing to preach on Sunday, I was thinking of our mission statement, and just, this is so in line with who we are. Like, we want to be these people who are inviting people to know and follow Jesus. And that's the call of Jacob's family. They're called to be the ones who go out and bless the rest of the world.
So do you think we get too lost in the weeds of details in life? Like, I've got 2 kids in college that are trying to figure out what their major is and what they're going to do for the rest of their life. Is it more about how we approach life with this mission in mind than it is, I'm called to be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so I used to be a youth pastor, and so would get like these types of questions all the time, right? I do think most of life is about doing the basics and trying to live faithfully as for the church, as the body of Christ, to be salt and light, to be the presence of God in this world, literally the people who are embodying the kingdom, we could say. I think that, if you're a young person listening along, it can feel very weighty and heavy to like try and figure out your entire life of who you're supposed to be. I do think that sometimes people get words from God, or it's just very clear of like how they're wired, or all of those different things, and that maybe makes it easier. But I think for most people, in our context, I mean, it would be fascinating. I don't know any of the data, but it would be fascinating to know what the data is on how many people work currently with the degree they graduated with.
Yeah.
Because that number has drastically shifted over the years.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we overstate the call of God on our life in the sense of it means a very particular, I will be I'll make it personal now. I will be the senior pastor at Hopevale, so everything is about me getting to that point.
Right.
Whereas I would say, like, even from my own life, and maybe people would view this differently, but I just feel like it's my job to just be faithful and to show up and to allow God to lead. So currently that means I'm the senior pastor of Hopevale. I don't know what that means in 20 years or 30 years, or I part of my story is that I love is I really do value the church and the discernment of the local church. And I've had people my whole life who have affirmed me continuing to use different gifts and step into different leadership roles and all of that. But I also want to be the person that's like, if I'm not doing this, I'm just as content and faithful working in the marketplace and trusting that God can and will use me there. Right. So like, I say that as a way of like, I know I'm getting into like mixing it a little bit because it's, ministry versus marketplace, all of that sort of stuff. But I would want to like, to the heart of your question, I would want to zoom out and say, yeah, I think it's mostly about us being faithful and doing what is right. And through that, because God can draw straight lines, if there are specific things that he's calling us to do, he will make that known.
Right.
But most of the time, I think living in God's world, a lot of times we have choices of like what we want to do. And it's like, well, I sit with people in like kind of more of a counseling setting, right? And sometimes it's like, people are very weighed down by what is both good options, and we haven't heard a clear word from God of what to do. And so sometimes in those moments, as we're discerning, I'm like, I think we're just at like, you get to decide. And if you go down path A, then this is probably going to be some of the pros and cons. And if you go down path B, there's going to be some pros and cons, but it's like, what do you want to do right now?
Yeah.
And so to me, that takes a lot of pressure off, because I don't have to have all of life figured out, or God's will doesn't mean I know exactly every little thing. It just means I'm called to do something, to be faithful. There's a little book, if anyone wants to read it, by Kevin DeYoung, actually called Just Do Something.
Okay.
And he's kind of playing with this idea where it's just like, yeah, I mean, if you don't know what you're supposed to do, just get up and what do you find interesting? And assuming it doesn't violate God's will and laws and all of these things, obviously that would be problematic. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, I don't know if it matters as much if you get a finance degree versus a marketing degree or whatever. Like, who are you and how are you wired?
Yeah. So I tell my kids all the time, to me as a parent, it's like, I don't care if you eat a red popsicle or a blue popsicle. I want you to enjoy the popsicle.
Right.
And I care how you eat the popsicle, not
don't
so
make a
much.
Mess with the popsicle.
Don't make a mess with the popsicle. And if your friends there, share, get another popsicle for
Yeah.
them. It's more about how you go about the activity.
Yeah.
But like, I gave you a popsicle and I just want you to enjoy it. It doesn't matter to me
that's great.
which color you choose.
Yeah.
How are you going to go about the process? So that's the way I've been guiding my kids. But I do see other people. My husband's sister's a teacher, and she was definitely born to be a teacher. So there are some people that you see that with, and you're going, well, how come I don't have that direct, clear path,
Yeah, and I think that's totally true. Some people are born, it seems like, to be something, and it's established or identified, I should say, from a very early age.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like who the person was actually meant to be does not become revealed until they're 60 years old or 70, you know what I mean? And so it is kind of this journey of making your way through life. And then because God is the author of the story, he does bring it all together. But like the amount of times that I get to talk to people where it's like when they see their story in reverse, then they can see how God was at work. And so that's the trick in this whole conversation, is sometimes we're looking forward and we get some almost anxiety over it. And so if you're finding yourself in that moment, that's where I would want to be like, just do something, be a part of a faith community, continue to grow. I mean, I'm convinced, and this is, I'm the senior pastor, so of course I'm going to say this in some sense, but I'm just convinced by it. Like, be a part of a local community, serve, be a part of the body life, all of these things, and God will bring, clarity to you. I
mean, that's really my story. I went back to college to get a business degree, not really knowing what I wanted to do with it. And as I walked that journey, I ended up focusing on accounting, landed in the finance manager office here, and then got more involved in body life. And that's how I was able to be pulled in eventually into this role. So
well, I was going to say, I was thinking of someone,
church.
I think that's exactly, I was talking to someone just like 2 weeks ago, and they were telling me, I was asking about their, what they do now professionally. And they're like, this is everything I would ever want to do.
Yeah.
But it was funny listening to the individual describe that story, because then they were talking about, we were recounting their history and all of the different roles that felt so random and like, was moving from different state to different state and wasn't sure how this all worked.
Yeah.
And then it was like through this 20-year, I don't remember exactly how the timeline worked, but it was something like that, where it's like it took 20 years and now we're in the place where actually all of those things I learned in this job and all of the things that I got with this degree and all of this experience came together in this perfect moment, right? So that's where I just want to, again, like, surrender. And I think there is a little bit of surrendering of like, okay, the reality is we want to control the story sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I would even push pretty strong into, that's ingrained in us as Americans of like, you set your career path, you walk these steps, and then as you do, you get this and you get that and all that sort of stuff. And maybe that is the case for some of us. Again, I'm not saying don't plan or don't be wise or go do something you're going to hate. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that there's this reality of, as you continue to walk faithfully, God can reveal and show you in ways that you're not going to understand. And that's okay. You can be surrendered to that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful plan, actually. So, all right. how can our actions today influence God's work in generations to come? Because that's what we see happening with this family. It ends up affecting us today and our mission. And so how do we live intentionally to affect the next generation?
I think, I do think, and we've touched on it, our actions certainly impact future generations. That's why life really matters. Like, you can fall into following God in a way that's like, well, him being in control means my actions don't matter. And that's like the exact opposite of the story that we're being invited into. I do think that I would want to encourage people to be thinking specifically, even how you phrase it at the end of, what does it look like to be invested in young people? And what does it look like to be helping them grow and develop and give them space to mature? So, I mean, literally, maybe that's serving in kids ministry or student ministry, or it's coaching, or it's teaching instruments, or, you know, again, I'm just watching my kids grow right now, right? And anytime I see someone investing in my kids, I try to make sure I say thank you and appreciate you, you know, and that's teachers, that's coaches, that's all of those people, because they need to know that they have a place and they have value and that adults care. And I think it's easy, like if I were, I don't want my words to be biting, but like, I think it's easy, and has been the case, that generally what happens is every generation looks back at the younger generations and blames them, scapegoats them, you know, measures them according to measurements that somehow always work in your favor, not their favor. And I mean, there's like ancient quotes that you can go look at from, I think I saw one from like Aristotle one time or something, or Plato, like just way back. And one of them was like railing against how slothful and lazy the next generation was.
Yeah.
And so I think it is, we are often inclined to, you know, over evaluate our own generation, whatever it may be. We don't, and every generation reacts to the generation before them. You know, we never can like the same music because we want to have our own thing. And so just recognize that and be okay with that. And I would encourage all of us to, because this is such a trope, and I don't even mean it just in Christianity, I mean it like in humanity, to like put down the next generation. I would love to see the church be the ones who build up the next generation.
Speak those words of blessing over them.
Exactly. Like, let's be the ones who, okay, so, I mean, let's just run with a ridiculous scenario. Let's say they are worse than we are. So what are we going to do? We're just going to let them keep going down that path? Like,
do something about it.
How about we have some grown-ups who show up and say, like, hey, we want to be a part of this change and this transformation, you know?
But what do you say to all the people that don't feel like they're equipped to do that? I think a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have the skill set to be a coach, to be a mentor. I don't know enough. Like, I think that's the excuse that I hear from people the most. They don't know how to. Yeah,
that's a great question. I think a couple things. One, the lie is that young people don't want to be like that. The fear is someone who's older is that we're not cool, or we don't have anything to offer them, whatever. Not my experience for the most part. I mean, I'm sure you can find cases where that is true, but most of the time, everyone and even specifically within the church is looking for someone who's like 5 to 10 to 20 years beyond them, who's going to tell them it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And is trying to figure out. So if you're young and in college, you want someone who's older, who's going to invest in you. And like, I mean, I remember being in college and my wife Brandon would tell you the same thing. Like, we had different people who would invite us to their house after church. That meant the world to us. Because I was 1,000 miles away from my family, you know? So to be able to occasionally go over and have a family meal, and they would always tell me, bring your laundry, and, you know, I could get my laundry done and I could sit on the couch rather than being in a dorm room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think sometimes we just really overcomplicate this. And I think you can, if you are willing to just invest and enter in, it it may feel scary. I don't know.
Yeah.
And if you need help, like, I mean, obviously if you're part of Hopevale, like we would love to help you and give you tools and resources. That goes before though we get into any sort of skill set. Like that's just sitting with people,
being available.
Or like I think of even the people in our church that I'm very blessed by who go around and talk to my kids that are adults and how grateful I am. You know, like they know that they do whatever sport they're in or something that happened that week. And so, you know, occasionally they just go, hey, tell me about your game this week, or tell me, like those things actually really matter in our young people's lives. And so that's where I would want to encourage us as adults, like actually you just showing up in the lobby and like, you know, if there's someone you're connected to, you don't have to go up to all the kids you don't know. let's you know, we don't want to go too
all
far.
The kids are running and hiding behind their parents.
Right. But if you have family friends or you know a family or whatever, like I guarantee my son is watching the 15-year-old and how he's acting.
Yeah.
And he's watching the 20-year-old and how they're, you know what I mean? Like we're all doing this all the time. So that's where there's just a plethora of opportunities, again, just in these small passing moments that are happening pretty quickly, that you can be really intentional with and even be a blessing in that sense. But then there is the ability to, maybe you do have a talent to teach an instrument or a sport or chess, or you start a book club because you love literature, or, you know, I mean, there's...
Or jumping in kids ministry.
Yeah. Well, and then I was going to get to like, and then we have our formal ministries where we actually help people with some of these skills and give them tools and resources so that they can know how to enter in. And so I would just want to like demythologize how scary young people are. And I would want to implore people to like, this actually matters, and you showing up matters in people's lives. And you may not feel that way. And that probably my son is not making anyone feel like when they come up to him in the lobby and ask him about his game, that their question really matters. In fact, he's giving off every indication that he's disinterested. You know, he's barely talking out, you know, like all the normal human functions we have to try and teach him, like, you know, please try and act like a human here, sort of a thing. But long term, he's going to remember that, because we all do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I would just encourage you, the next generation actually is amazing when you take the time to slow down and get to know them and see what's happening. We have thriving youth in Saginaw and Bay City.
Yeah.
I'm a part of a group at a high school that meets, and there's 50 kids that show up every Wednesday morning to do a devotional together. And I know our young adults from Hopevale got together on Saturday, and there was 40 of them that celebrated their Friendsgiving together. There's a lot of really awesome people in the next generation coming up, and that are pursuing the mission of God. So don't be afraid to jump in with them.
And they're hungry for real things.
They really are.
They've grown up, like I was on the tail end of like everything, or the beginning of like everything being smoke and mirrors, sort of like, you know, like just very attractional sort of. And that kind of, it feels like has run its course to some degree. And now people are like, they want to know what's real. They're very familiar when they're being sold something.
Yeah, they can pick out AI. My kids can pick out AI, like images and videos. And I'm like, how can you tell? And they're like, we can just tell that's not real.
Yeah, they're natives in this world. Yeah. And so I think that's the biggest gift you can give our young people, is just being real and authentic and showing up and bringing your whole self, because they're wondering, can they do that in this world? And they need someone who's going to show them how to do that. So.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of my fears of jumping in youth years ago, was I'm not cool. Sure. You know, there was young college kids that were a part of ministry as well. I'm like, I'm not that. And then I jumped in, and years later, these kids have graduated, and I'm still connecting with them. You know, they just want somebody that's going to show up and care about them week after week.
Well, and you get to bring your own, like your own piece of who you are. So when I was a youth pastor, I had a volunteer named Susie, and I don't remember how old Susie was when she started with me. She was probably 60 or somewhere in that range. And I just felt like she should be a part of it, because I felt like she had so much to offer our group. And so I went and talked to her, and she's like, I am too old. I will not relate. And I was like, I promise, if you just come, I can help you. And I think you have so much that all of us can benefit from, especially these girls. Like they just are looking for someone who can be, you don't have to be the silly person. You don't have to be the crazy hair, dancing up front,
Yeah.
whatever
Let
type
somebody else
of
do
whatever you
that.
think. Yeah, like that's why we have college people, you know,
Right.
or whatever. Susie stepped in. She was amazing. Everyone's favorite leader. She still, I know to this day, has former students who reach out to her
Aw.
and, you know, connect with her because she was willing to show up in a season of life where she was like, this is clear. I'm clearly past this.
Yeah.
And so, again, there's young people are hungry for people who will show up and be real and authentic and invest in them because they know when you're investing in them and care about them. And if you will do that, you will impact a lot of people's lives.
I love that. So as we turn back to the story and kind of wrap up this whole story, Joseph's family points to God's redemptive plan across generations fulfilled in Jesus. So how can we invite Jesus into our family mission today?
How do we invite God into our family mission today? Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I think I would just want to call us back to wherever your family is at, however you evaluate them, he has healing and wholeness available to you, and he invites you into his mission. And so it is easy for us to pick apart. We just picked apart all of the reasons why someone may feel like they can't be a part of student ministry or kids ministry or college ministry or young adults or whatever. We do that with God all the time of like, I don't know. He's clearly someone else, whatever, knows the Bible more, or someone else prays more, or someone loves him more, or doesn't have these vices that I have, or, you know, like all of these things. And I think the good news of Jacob and his family story is that he invites you as you are and says, if you will surrender and you will be the people who confess and you will be the people who enter in, I can use you in my kingdom.
Yeah.
And so I would just want to invite all of our individuals, all of our families into what does that look like, and how could God use you? And you know, there's ways to start thinking about that intentionally, even of maybe serving out in the community, or again, serving on some of the different teams we have at church of greeting people or donuts or kids ministry. Or we have, you know, one of the things I love about our church is we have so many families that will go and serve together during one service and then come to another service. So they'll go to kids ministry and then they'll, you know, come into service, or they'll serve donuts or whatever it is. And so I think just like what would it look like to be a little bit, maybe the invitation is God's inviting you into his mission, and like, what would it look like to be a little bit more intentional and to not just show up and, you know, kind of, consume, but also participate in serving and being present. So
just take that one next step. I think we look at scripture and there's a whole cast of characters in there that have lots of flaws, and God still uses them. But then we're like, oh, like David, for example. Oh, that's just David. Of course God used David. But we go back to the beginning. He was just a little shepherd boy.
Yeah.
You know, we all start somewhere. It's one step at a time. And so what's the one next step that God is inviting you to, and being intentional about that? So final thoughts as we wrap this up?
Final thoughts are two things. One is a funny moment that I never was able to work into.
Okay.
There's this moment in the story after Judah surrenders where then Joseph is going to send him back to go get Jacob and tell him like that Joseph is alive. So it's after kind of the healing moment. And there's this moment where Joseph tells him, he's like, and as you go, don't quarrel, like don't get into a fight. And then it just continues on with the story. And I think it's the funniest line ever, because it's all of these brothers that have to travel back. And I'm just thinking of my own brothers of like, someone has to be the grown up and be like, and by the way, don't quarrel.
Yeah.
Like, can you just go get dad? Can you not be competitive? So it cracks me up every time I read it. I think that's so funny.
Yeah.
And then, I think just as we look at the story of Jacob, it is this deep story that has so many layers to it that invites you into it. So again, this is just like one little tidbit that we didn't get into, but there's even this reality of when Jacob surrenders Benjamin finally. So right before that part of the story I just told, it kind of is his Mount Moriah moment where Abraham has to surrender Isaac, right? So like it really is just this replaying of the same story over again and seeing how the characters either live up to the moments or fail the moments or relive the moments in like a 2.0 sort of way. And I think that's the power of these stories and why we want to live in them and experience them and feel them and wrestle with them, because actually we're all going to encounter those moments in our own life, to whatever that means. And so it helps give us imagination for our own world and how to enter in. So when I get to my Mount Moriah moment, or I get to my moment of being a substitute offering, or, you know, or offering forgiveness, or being a blessing, right? Like now I have language, I have a grammar even to know how to move forward in my life.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I have to create in and of myself, or be this autonomous person who's pushing all this out. But it's like I've received this story that has been given to me. I've received even my family tradition here, and now it's helping me navigate my own world and giving me a picture of what this could look like. So I just think it's the power of story. It's the power of scripture, of inviting us into our ancestors' story, so that we too, it is this idea that scripture is living and active, and it is present in our lives if we have the eyes to see it, of like making it real for us in this moment. So I love the story. I love all the layers to it, and I love the invitation for how it invites us to think about our own lives.
Well, and I really appreciate you trusting the discernment of the Holy Spirit as you led us through this series, and the perfect timing of it leading into holidays where, you know, we're reading a story of family drama. A lot of people experience that at the holidays. And now hopefully we're prepared and equipped to surrender and to give forgiveness and to love and choose grace and all of the things that we've learned over the last couple of weeks. So thank you for leading us through this.
My pleasure.
Looking forward to what's next.
Yeah.